All right, let's welcome in our guest, Chris Vanini, senior college football writer for The Athletic and co-host of the Until Saturday podcast alongside David Ubben and Damian Harris. Chris, it's a pleasure having you on, man.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
Um, let's just jump right into it, man. We're excited for these semifinal matchups. We'll go in chronological order here. Kind of talk about the Orange Bowl first. That's going to be taking place 7:30, January 9th, Thursday night. You got Notre Dame versus Penn State. First things first, you hearing anything about Abdul Carter, on his availability for the game? I mean, other than him posting that Darth Vader pic on X?
Yeah, it still seems up in the air. I know James Franklin said on Saturday that they're hoping he can go, and it just kind of TBD. I don't really know. It sound like an upper body arm type of injury. I think that's a big one. He's maybe the best defensive player in the country, probably is, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Boise State was able to move the ball better once he left the game. And we know that Notre Dame's offense is very run reliant, and they're going to have to win the line of scrimmage. So big player. His availability, it just at the moment, at least as of last we heard from James Franklin, is we'll see.
Yeah. To this game, though, it feels a little bit like, I know you got a wrestling background there. It feels a little bit like Undertaker versus Kane. Back in the day, just, they just want to beat the absolute heck out of each other. They want to do a lot of the same things. As far as when Notre Dame has the ball, do you think that they're going to be able to find more success on the ground with Love and Price than they did against Georgia? Obviously, Carter's status depends a lot on that.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to, because that is what this Notre Dame offense is predicated on. I mean, they beat Georgia with 90 yards of passing. They didn't throw the ball great against Indiana either. This is not a good passing team whatsoever, and they're going to have to win the line of scrimmage. And they did against Georgia, and that was what was as impressive as anything else. I mean, how many times we see Notre Dame in a big bowl game against an SEC team and just get pushed around? I was at that Rose Bowl semifinal in Texas against Alabama. They didn't have a chance. We all remember the national championship game, the 2012 season, didn't have a chance. And they won the line of scrimmage against Georgia on both sides of the ball. That won them the game. And Penn State has one of the best defensive lines in the country, depending on if Abdul Carter's there. So they're going to have to, because they're going to run the ball. They are like the number 1 or 2 rushing team in the country, I think, based on yards per carry. So that's what it comes down to if Notre Dame's going to have a chance.
Yeah. When you look at Riley Leonard, he's not your traditional quarterback, obviously, 90 yards passing, like you just mentioned. Looking at him and Drew Aller, which quarterback would you trust? Who's more trustworthy in this game?
That is tough, because I don't know if any of the quarterbacks left in the playoff are trustworthy. And you look at these two guys, neither of them are like breakout guys. Like, both of these teams are very, very low nationally in explosive plays in the passing game. Starting with Riley Leonard, we know he's just generally not efficient, but he's a really, really good runner, and he's really, really good at avoiding sacks. Even when he's not scrambling, if he's not taking off and running, if he's just scrambling, avoiding sacks, really, really good, like Tom Brady-esque almost. And then he doesn't slide when he runs anymore, because he doesn't know how to slide. He basically just jumps forward or gets tackled. And that's going to be a gigantic part of this running game. In that sense, like, he's not turning the ball over a ton because he's not throwing it a ton. Drew Aller for Penn State, like, you watch him and there'll be like 3 or 4 passes and you're like, oh, that's like NFL level type. And you see the talk from NFL people saying, like, I know Drew Aller said he's coming back next year, but if he has a really good playoff, he may go pro, because there are not a lot of good quarterbacks in this class. And you'll see those touchdown passes he threw to Tyler Warren against Boise State. And then you'll see like an open third down pass that he misses, and you're just like, how do you miss that throw, And so you can see it in flashes, but the best part about Drew Aller is he doesn't throw interceptions. He doesn't put the ball where it's not supposed to be. So I trust him to not give you a killer play. But are you going to get the plays you need to get? I don't know. If I had to pick between the two, I guess Riley Leonard, because he's in more control and it's kind of more on him. But if you get a good day from Drew Aller, Penn State could win it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris, to that point, just talking about Riley Leonard and really both of these teams, if perimeter play at the receiver position is, people's types of game, this is not their type of game. This game is absolutely going to be played in a phone booth and, at the line of scrimmage. So with that being said, like, why are teams not stacking the box against Notre Dame and against their run game and Riley Leonard? Like, there were multiple times throughout that Georgia game where I was curious as to why they didn't have more hats in the box to try to stop them up front.
Well, I wonder if part of it is Georgia thought they maybe didn't need to. That they are, really talented, really gigantic on the inside in a way that very few teams are, but didn't work. Notre Dame didn't run the ball amazing in that game, but the key in that game was Notre Dame allowed one tackle for loss the whole game.
Yep.
They were never behind the change.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the problem with Georgia. Georgia allowed 4 sacks, I think 9 TFLs. So they were constantly off balance. Suddenly you're in a passing state. Notre Dame was just constantly chugging along. And so for whatever reason, Georgia couldn't get those negative plays. And I think that's what Penn State is going to have to do. They're going to have to probably blitz more. They're going to have to get you in 3rd and 10s and more stuff like that. Because Notre Dame didn't really get there. They were always on schedule. So, Notre Dame has some talented receivers. They went through the portal and got some guys, but it really hasn't been a part of their game this year. So will Penn State put more guys in the box? Potentially. We just saw them do that against Ashton Genty, and they slowed him down. So I imagine a pretty similar type of plan is going to be there. You're just going to have to account for quarterback run a lot more than you did before.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, with the Notre Dame defense, I've been seeing some, guys breaking down film of Notre Dame on Twitter and stuff, and they were talking about how Notre Dame played a lot of cover one against Georgia. They were putting their very talented corners on islands against the Georgia receivers because obviously the Georgia receivers just aren't that talented, and they were really bracketing the tight end position for Georgia with their talented safeties and linebackers. You got to think. Don't you think that's kind of the game plan in this one too, with the lack of explosive receivers that Penn State has, and obviously, arguably the best player on the field for either team in this game is Tyler Warren, tight end for Penn State.
Yeah, I think Warren has more catches and targets than everybody else combined on the team. I think. Yeah, you're gonna have to bracket him. Like that's what you're gonna have to do to him. Boise State didn't do that because Boise State had to blitz every other play, or else they were not going to get pressure on Drew Aller. And their defense is predicated on that. They were really high in sacks and they were really high in allowing explosive plays. So that was what you were going to get from Boise State. Notre Dame is going to be a little bit different. They've got they lost Riley Mills against Indiana, their best defensive lineman, their sack leader. And they still got 4 sacks against Georgia. I mean, imagine if he was playing. They lost one of their All-American corners earlier in the season, and they still got really good talent. Like, this defense is legit. It's deep in a way that we have not seen in a very long time. And credit to Marcus Freeman and everybody on that staff. But yeah, that is essentially the game plan I would expect to see from Notre Dame. Bracket Tyler Warren, everybody else single coverage, because I don't think Penn State has the receivers that exactly scare you. And I'll be curious, Drew Aller in the quarterback run game as well. He doesn't do it a ton, but he scrambles pretty well. Picks up some 3rd and longs. Did that a couple of times against SMU. But yeah, I think the Notre Dame game plan is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, and I know that I was listening to another show this week. I was listening to Cole Kubelik talk about it on McElroy and Kubelik, that Cole Kubelik talked to defensive coordinator Al Golden before the game, and he was talking about like some of like throwing the ball to the running back out of the backfield was something that they were a little bit worried about in this game, more so than anything in the passing game. And obviously they ended up scoring a touchdown on that. Georgia did with the wheel route with the running back out of the backfield. Penn State does that really well with Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. Actually, Tyler and I were at the Big Ten championship game, and they really were opening that up against Oregon.
Yep.
I got to imagine, like, do you think that that's something that Penn State goes to in this game, is using the backs out of the backfield a lot in the passing game?
Yeah, they didn't do that a bunch against Boise State, again, because I think they needed the running backs back there for pass protection because you knew the blitzes were coming. Penn State also, if you watch that game, they were running all over Boise State. And offense coordinator Andy Kolnicki was getting too cute. There were several situations when you're just yelling at your TV screen, just like, run the ball, man. What are you doing? Both of those running backs, I think, had like 6 or 7 yards of carry in that game.
Especially in the third quarter.
Yeah. So we'll see. But that's not new. The same thing happened against SMU. I was at the Penn State SMU game. And if you talk to Penn State fans, they'll tell you the same thing. You talk to Kansas fans when Andy Kolnicki was the OC there, it's the same thing. It's like sometimes he just does a little too much, and when something is working, just stick with that. Now, I don't think Penn State's going to be able to average 6 or 7 yards per carry against Notre Dame, but will he stick with what is working, or will he try to do too much and it'll cost you a drive, or it'll be a 3rd and short and they call a pass instead of a run and it's a messy play and then you're punting on that drive? Like, how many wasted drives is Penn State going to have? I think that is something to watch. But running backs out of the backfield, yeah, it's certainly a possibility. Both those guys are really good at catching the ball.
Yeah, we got to talk about James Franklin. Obviously, he's had his struggles as an underdog against ranked teams. The reality of the situation is that he's probably going to make some questionable decisions during this game that fans are not going to like, due to it being a big game, a close game, whatever you want to say. At least that's the perception that, people get. I know they got wins over SMU and Boise State, but how badly does James Franklin and Penn State need to win this game?
It's interesting because, Marcus Freeman was kind of in the same spot, which was getting to the playoff and hosting a first-round game was the expectation. And you did that, and you beat Indiana. How much does beating Indiana count? Yeah, we can debate blah, blah, blah about that. But when you beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, then it's like, okay, Marcus Freeman, like, he's got it. Like, there's that big stamp victory. I don't think Penn State has that yet because SMU and Boise State, whatever you think of them, I think they're both good teams. But Penn State has more talent. Yep. And with James Franklin, he'll always win you the games when he has more talent. Honestly, Kirby Smart's the same way. And Kirby Smart's kind of have the similar issue where his record against teams of equal or greater talent is not that great. That's why his record against Alabama is what it is. But James Franklin, if he's got the better team, he'll win. And that's what's happened through 2 games. Do they have the better team against Notre Dame? I don't know. I think they're probably about even. Notre Dame's about a 1-point favorite. So if you lose this game, you can say, hey, you made the playoff, you won 2 games, you made the semifinals, but you lost to Ohio State, you lost to Oregon, you lost to Notre Dame. Where is the signature win of that season? Is it Illinois? Again, you're the better team. So, James Franklin's a really good coach. Penn State is in a good position with him. But if you lose to Notre Dame, I don't know if that big game question goes away. And you've got a few coaches like that. I think Dan Lanning is kind of in that situation too. So if James Franklin wins this game, I think that's done. I think that goes away regardless of what happens in the national championship. So it's a big game for him.
Yeah, just give us, to finish off your keys to the game, kind of just tell us how each team can win this game.
I think Notre Dame, it's stay ahead of the chains. Don't get those negative plays. Don't allow sacks. Don't put yourself in those bad positions. Like the Notre Dame fans got mad at me for saying this, but like Georgia could have won that game. Like it was right there. You don't fumble in the red zone. You don't give up that sack deep in your own territory right before halftime. You don't give up a kick return touchdown. That's 17 to 21 points right there. But like that is what football comes down to. A couple of big plays in big moments. And Notre Dame, most of the season, has made those big plays in every single moment. That's why they're a good team. That's why they were the better team. Can they do that here against Penn State? Which one is going to do it? If you're staying ahead of the chains, 3rd and shorts, and getting pressure with your defensive line, that's what you're going to have to do. Just avoid the negative plays. And for Penn State, I think you're going to have to hit some big plays, whether that's in the passing game or the running game. I don't know if Penn State can dink and dunk as much down the field because their play calling is going to mess something up along the way anyway. So I think this is much like the Sugar Bowl. This is going to be a line of scrimmage game. 2 really good teams on the line. Typically, who wins the line of scrimmage wins. Notre Dame won it against Georgia. We'll see against Penn State. Notre Dame, stay ahead of the chains, avoid the negative plays, do that. Penn State, I think you're going to have to hit some big plays. Find Tyler Warren downfield for 20, 30 yards, and Drew Allen make a couple of big runs and stuff like that. The games usually come down to line of scrimmage in big plays, whether that's a special teams return. Notre Dame special teams have been really, really good in these playoffs. They were the worst kicking team in the country coming into the playoffs. Part of that was because of injuries. but their kicker is like 5 for 6 or 4 for 5 in the playoff. He made 3 over 40 yards against Georgia. I mean, if they get that kind of special teams play, because Notre Dame has little margin for error with how they play. And so if they get a turnover, turn it into a touchdown. If they make a field goal, get a kick return, like that type of stuff. Penn State's got to hit those big plays because Notre Dame has been making just enough big plays and not allowing any of them. That's how they've been winning. But I'm picking Notre Dame. I think they're favored by like 1.5. It's a tough one. Could really easily see both of them. But Notre Dame, for whatever reason, they just have it. You know, they make the plays when you need to make the plays to win the game. And so I'm going to go with Notre Dame and Ohio State.
Okay. Chris, can't thank you enough, man, for coming on, discussing these 2 semifinal matchups that are sure to be great games this week. Let the people know one more time where they can find you online, where they can read and listen to your stuff.
Yep, theathletic.com for all of our very deep college football playoff coverage there. The Until Saturday podcast with me, David Ubben, and former Alabama running back Damian Harris. And at Chris Vanini on pretty much any social media that you use.
Awesome. Can't thank you enough again, man. Had a lot of fun talking about it. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Man, that was fantastic. You know, loved having Chris on. That was awesome that he took time to come just talk some ball with us, talk some semifinal action with us. Love what some of his takes and what he had to say in regards to the games. You know, obviously he was big on talking about the line of scrimmage play and who's going to make the least amount of mistakes, which obviously is what happens when you have bigger games like this, when you have opponents, especially in the Notre Dame Penn State game where not much separates the two opponents from each other. Usually comes down to who can make the explosive plays, who can prevent the other from making explosive plays, who can win the line of scrimmage, and who's going to force mistakes and make the least amount of mistakes. And guys, seriously, like if you're not following Chris on X, you need to do that. You also need to go check out his work at The Athletic. I mean, his articles are fantastic. The guy is just, he's a ball knower, well-versed in the college football world. But we were lucky and blessed to have him come on and just chop it up with us here today, weren't we, Tyler?
Yes, sir. It was pretty awesome. How about you and I chop it up a little bit on these games here? Let's start off with the Orange Bowl. Yeah, we got Notre Dame, Penn State. Notre Dame right now is 1.5-point favorite. Taking place on Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. So we got an earlier kickoff. We love that here on the East Coast, as always. Since 2019, Penn State with a rest advantage is 10-1 straight up. So they got the rest advantage in this game. Obviously, you know they got to kick their feet up for 2 days and watch Notre Dame and Georgia just pound each other on January 2nd. However, Notre Dame with a rest disadvantage since 2019. So getting less time off because everybody likes to schedule a bye week before they play Notre Dame. Notre Dame's 21-2 with a rest disadvantage. Okay. Obviously, they just won with Georgia having more time off too. So they're no stranger to this position. I don't think that's an advantage for either team really. So not really a leg up for Penn State. Marcus Freeman, we talked about it earlier this year, neutral site games. Marcus Freeman's 9-0. Hasn't lost a game at a neutral site as the official head coach of Notre Dame. He started off his career coaching the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State. You know, he kind of jumped in there as a head coach. They lost that game, but kind of as the official head coach starting in 2022, he hasn't lost a game at a neutral site, and he's 28-5 straight up when they are listed as a favorite. Obviously, we know the struggles of Penn State. James Franklin, 7-25 as an underdog while he's at Penn State, and 16-27 against ranked opponents. So, a lot at stake here for both these coaches. A lot at stake here for both these programs. Notre Dame obviously has been to the playoff, and they've been to a national championship more recently than Penn State. Penn State has not been here in a long time. Like since the 80s, maybe the early 90s, this is foreign territory for Penn State.
Yeah, it's no secret, man. I mean, I know Penn State fans get tired of hearing about it, and some talk about it themselves. Like when we were at the Big Ten championship game in Indy, like talking to some of the fans there at the sports bar before the game, and in Lucas Oil there. I mean, there's some that obviously talk about it there too. I mean, James Franklin in big games. I know we've had a few people get frustrated with us, like, oh, well, now all of a sudden SMU's not a big game and Boise's not a big game. That's not what we're saying. Those are big games, yes. But this game, this is the type of game that, like you just alluded to it in some of those numbers that you gave out, when he's an underdog, when the deck of cards is stacked evenly or slightly against him, these are the games he loses.
That's exactly what Chris said when we were just talking to him. I mean, he just said when they have more talent, they win the games. It's plain and simple.
Yep. So this is the type of game that he needs to prove to the silence the naysayers. And we're not saying we're naysayers. We're just talking about he needs to silence the naysayers, silence whatever you want to call them, haters, whatever. And like Penn State fans that doubt him in these bigger games, we all know what's going to happen. If they are to lose this game, the college football media world and fans, even of Penn State and stuff, they're going to immediately go to, see, there's James Franklin again, can't win the bigger games and the games against the best opponents. That's exactly what the narrative will be. And Marcus Freeman, on the flip side of that, like you've talked about, like he's been really good against ranked opponents in his time at Notre Dame and his limited time he's been at Notre Dame. It's the games against Northern Illinois, or the games against Marshall, or the games against Stanford last year, where he's a huge favorite that for whatever reason he has found ways to lose those games. The bigger games so far that he's been in, he's found ways to win those games. At Texas A&M earlier this year, first game of the year, against Georgia, and as you called it, the Sugar Dome. I love that, by the way, if you can't tell. I'm not even making fun of you. I legit like that better than the Superdome. But that marquee, push you over the top, get the rest of the world talking about what a superstar type coach you could be moving forward and launch your career trajectory, all that stuff. That is what Marcus Freeman just did against Georgia. James Franklin obviously been doing it a lot longer. He needs this win from a public perception standpoint, in my opinion, more than Marcus Freeman does. Just because, again, of how people view him in regards to games that he's either an underdog in or it's an extremely close spread like this, not taking anything away from winning 2 college football playoff games against SMU and Boise. But 2 things can be true, again, at the same time. Those were big games that he won in the college football playoff games, but this is the type of game he needs to win to prove other people wrong. Yep. And he's got a hell of a team, man, to do it. Do you agree or disagree with that as far as that take?
That he's got a good team to do it?
Sorry, no, back on in the deal of like James Franklin and like needing this win probably more perception-wise than Marcus Freeman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Freeman's been doing it for 3 years, right? He's got everyone. He just got extended. He'll have more chances, obviously, and Franklin is getting up there. He's been at Penn State for 10 years now. So I think this might even be his 11th season. So he's and he hasn't been to the playoff yet. Obviously, they play Ohio State and Michigan every year. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. They cannot get over the hump against Ohio State and Michigan. When they did beat Ohio State, they went to the Big Ten Championship and won. They still got beat out because they lost earlier in the year against Pittsburgh. So it just hasn't lined up for Penn State this year, in James Franklin's tenure. So let's dive into the matchup a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when Notre Dame has the ball, right? When Notre Dame's offense is out there versus Penn State's defense, you got the number 3 scoring offense versus number 5 scoring defense versus FBS opponents. So people want to talk about Notre Dame. I think you even mentioned on the last episode before the Georgia game, they want to take the air out of the ball with those long, slogging drives. They're actually number 2 in points per play. And obviously that has something to do with, some of the schedule they played and some of the weaker opponents they played. But against Army, Navy, USC, they had a lot of big play, big strike ability. And they have that in that offense. But against, Texas A&M and against Georgia, and most likely against Penn State, that's where they transform back into the team that wants to run the ball. I just think that drive against Georgia in the fourth quarter with 9 minutes to go, was probably one of their most impressive drives of the year. They didn't even score, but Georgia knew what they were going to do. They knew they were going to run the ball at them, and Georgia just couldn't stop them. And you had the offensive line leaning on them in the fourth quarter, just like they did against Texas A&M in week 1. So from week 1 to just now, it's been the same story for Notre Dame.
Yeah, in these bigger games, it really is. It seems like it's more of like a heavyweight fight. They're standing in the middle of the ring, trading punches with one another, and which one's going to break first. You just said it. Like, you were at that game, first game of the year of Notre Dame at Texas A&M. In that fourth quarter, Notre Dame's offensive line, it was obvious that Texas A&M's defensive front started giving out against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was able to run the football in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame in the fourth quarter against Georgia, like late in that game, Georgia knew they were going to be running the ball every play. Couldn't, like you just said, couldn't stop it there in the fourth quarter. Couldn't get them off the field because Notre Dame's offensive line had been leaning on them the whole game. And so that's the type of game I expect in this Penn State game in regards to the style of game that's going to be played. It's going to be a heavyweight fight, standing in the middle of the ring, trading punches with one another. Again, we talked about it with Chris. Got to know the status of Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
I mean, he's arguably the best defensive player in college football, like Chris said. Elite edge rusher. Dude, we were there at the Big Ten championship game, and you and I both left our seat. It was funny. People around us were almost like, what are these guys getting that excited about? Noah Whittington, the second-string tailback for Oregon, is a jitterbug. Dude is fast as can be on that field. And he went one way and changed directions and went the opposite way of the field. And Abdul Carter was on the same side where he was changing direction to go the other way. And Abdul Carter ran him down from behind.
Yeah.
And you and I both came out of our seat, and we both looked at the same time, were freaking out, like, for the same reason. Like, we couldn't believe a man that size that just ran that fast to run down Noah Whittington like that.
Yeah, there's a reason he wears number 11.
Yeah, he wears the sticks. He wears the sticks for Penn State for a reason. It's so much cooler.
He's top 10 pick in the NFL draft for sure, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like, he's a difference maker. He's in a year this year where there's not as many difference making, like, true NFL, like those speedy edge rushers. That's what Abdul Carter is, and he's also powerful as well.
Well, when you talk about Notre Dame, like, running the ball, I mean, they're number 2 in yards per carry. Penn State's number 8 in, defending the run. Obviously, Jeremiah Love over 1,000 yards, Jadarian Price averaging 6.8 yards per carry. And then you got Riley Leonard throwing in 750 yards rushing there too. I would expect Abdul Carter to do a lot of spying on Riley Leonard this game.
Yeah, I would too. And the only thing about what that is, though, you're kind of picking your poison. If you do that, you're definitely taking away your most elite pass rusher. Now, I know Kobe King's a good pass rusher as well, and Danny Dennis Sutton's a really good pass rusher too, and is able to get he's not your same style of like edge rusher, but he's able to get pressure on the quarterback too. But yeah, I would imagine that there will be some times that they will spy with Carter. I'm curious if Penn State believes that they can play Notre Dame more like straight up with their front. I'm sure they believe in their defensive front enough to where maybe they don't have to spy with Carter. I mean, maybe they spy with Kobe King. I mean, he's also elite with his speed and at his size on the defensive side of the ball for Penn State. But maybe they don't waste their most elite pass rusher and the best pass rusher in college football as a spy. Because if they're doing that, that's almost a win for Notre Dame. If they're causing the other team to take their best pass rusher and turn him into a spy as opposed to rushing after the quarterback. But I get your point. Like, it's like, what are we scared of more? Leonard beating us in the passing game or him beating us in the run game?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, Riley Leonard, it's easier said than done to spy him too, because like Jake said a couple weeks ago when he was on the show, he is a sneaky fast runner. Like, and you saw it at times in that Georgia game where he went straight up the middle one time, and a dude was right in front of him, and he just kind of put a little move on him, and it wasn't a big move at all, but just kind of put a little move on him and just kind of shoved him off to the side and ended up running for 25 yards. So he is a sneaky runner. He's more dangerous with his legs than his arms this year, probably in his entire career too. Like, Notre Dame's bread and butter is not their passing game. Penn State's pass defense is very solid, but
Yeah, they got two really good corners. And you got to imagine I think Penn State's going to come out. They're not going to commit any extra bodies in the passing game. I think they'll put their corners on islands with Notre Dame's receiving core, and they're going to try to play this game in the box because they know that that's what Notre Dame's going to want to do. It just boils down to, Penn State is like for 7 turnovers. Penn State is for 7 turnovers in this playoff so far. They're +5 in the turnover margin. Notre Dame is number 2 in the country in turnover margin. They're like +18 on the year in the turnover margin.
Yeah.
So Notre Dame doesn't turn the ball over a lot. Riley Leonard is more of a game manager, smart type quarterback. He's not going to sit there and put the ball tons of times in harm's way. Can Penn State do what they've done in these first 2 playoff games and find ways to get extra possessions for their offense? Because it really is going to come down to, like, far as who makes the most mistakes.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say Notre Dame plays a clean game. They're going to have to against the Penn State defense that averages 1.6 takeaways per game. They had 4 against Boise. So the offense is going to have to play a clean game. On the other side of the ball, Penn State, when they got the ball, it's number 2 or number 19 scoring offense versus the number 2 scoring defense. Obviously, we just saw Notre Dame shut down Georgia's rushing attack. And they're definitely going to have their work cut out for them against Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, who both have over 1,000 yards rushing this year. They're averaging, together, the whole team is 5.3 yards per carry. So that's going to be, I think, the main focus for Notre Dame's defense in this game.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny to say this, but like, dude, Penn State's rushing attack and Notre Dame's, but Penn State's, as far as like Notre Dame in this matchup, who they're facing, a lot better than what Georgia's was this year. Georgia's rushing game this year was borderline almost non-existent compared to what Georgia's rushing offenses of the past were. Allen and Singleton, different animal. Nittany's done it everywhere he's been. As far as the rushing offenses that he's had, I talked to you before the season, went back and looked at what he did at Wisconsin Whitewater and Buffalo and Kansas. I mean, he's always had a prolific running game. And obviously taking over at Penn State when you've got 2 horses like this with Allen and Singleton doesn't hurt. But again, you've got Love and Price with Notre Dame. We don't really know the status yet of Love. But then you've got Singleton and Allen with Penn State. Notre Dame, like receivers, they're solid. They're fine, but they're not going to be the type of receivers that's going to necessarily just, that you're losing sleep over at night. Penn State, same thing.
Yeah.
And Penn State, it comes down to Allen, Singleton, and obviously Tyler Warren. What is Notre Dame's plan against that? Now, we're definitely not your X's and O's, deep dive into X's and O's type podcast, but obviously we do our research and do, our own studies and stuff when we come here to talk ball with you guys. And Tyler and I did some deep dives into it and seen some of your X's and O's gurus talking about this. But Notre Dame pretty much against Georgia for the majority of the game ran a cover 1, robber type of defense against them, which they were just matching up their corners against against Georgia's receivers, man to man, and they were taking safeties and linebackers and basically bracketing the tight ends because Georgia does like to use Oscar Delp and that crew in the tight ends. Obviously, Penn State wants to use Tyler Warren in that. According to these X's and O's gurus, that's a lot of what Ohio State did to Penn State earlier this year. They put their corners on islands with Penn State's receivers, and they were bracketing Tyler Warren. Now, if it was as easy as just saying, we're just going to bracket Tyler Warren, we think we can shut him down. Again, man, Nittany will find ways to line Tyler Warren up. That is what I think the unique thing that they do with him. They've lined him up at center from the tight end. They've lined him up at quarterback. They line him up at tailback. They line him up in the slot. They line him up in the line of scrimmage as far as your traditional tight end way. Line him up at receiver. They do a lot of different things with him. So it's not as easy, in my opinion, as just going out there and saying we're just going to bracket this guy because he doesn't line up usually in the traditional tight end way. So what is Notre Dame going to do to stop Singleton, and Allen in the passing game? Because I do think they're going to use them in the passing game more. And what is their game plan for Tyler Warren?
Yeah, it's the Ohio State comp is pretty good on the defensive side because Notre Dame's got the safeties back there who can do it with the Don Schuler and Xavier Watts. And like you said, like both sides of the ball, the wide receivers aren't scaring these defenses. So Christian Gray and freshman Leonard Moore are going to be put on islands out there. And I think they're fine with that. They've done that. They did that against USC a lot, right? And so they're good with that.
This is the best rushing attack, but for really both teams, as far as the style, like Notre Dame with the three-headed monster of two really good tailbacks and the quarterback position from Riley Leonard, best rushing attack Penn State's faced.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing on the other side. I think this is the best. I know that Notre Dame played Army and Navy and stuff, but as far as like at the Power 4 level, traditional style, like tough run game to stop. I mean, again, Aller can move a little bit. He's shown that he can do some things in the run game too. Not as obviously much as Leonard, but he's shown he can do a little bit. But the two-headed monster of Allen and Singleton, and I mean, too, man, we got to mention it. I mean, Notre Dame just played a physical war with Georgia, and Penn State's had extra time off, and obviously didn't play the same physical war against Boise. Again, Boise, made some things happen in that game, but it's not like going up against a Kirby Smart Georgia team.
Penn State probably hasn't played a physical game since that Ohio State game. I mean, like a really physical game, like against a physical opponent.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most physical game they played, but since then was Minnesota. At Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, Minnesota's physical, but other than that, I mean, it's not like it's been some like major physical battles after that.
Well, the big question is, and you talk about Andy Kotelnicki, is he going to get too cute with his offense? He loves to move Tyler Warren around, put him under center, put him at quarterback, running back, all this stuff. Is he going to get too cute like he did against Boise State when we were talking with Chris? I mean, we just run the ball all night, and they win that game probably by more than 17. Now, they're not going to be able to do that against Notre Dame. I would be shocked if they averaged, north of 4 to 4.5 yards per carry against Notre Dame. But, he just, I wonder if they're just kind of sitting there talking in the meeting rooms like, we got to try to run the ball. We can't get too cute. I don't know. I don't know what the offense game plan is.
Yeah, I think both these teams obviously are going to run the football a lot, but I mean, again, man, both of these teams are ranked really high in turnover margin. They're really good defensively at turning you over. And obviously they're really good. Both of them are really good at not turning the ball over. I mean, Aller's thrown 7 interceptions this entire year.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Which team do you think can win this game, has a better chance of winning this game if nobody makes like the crucial turnover mistakes like that and they're not turning the ball over? Like, which team you think can win just straight up without having any help in the turnover game?
I mean, the turnovers, we talked about it. Like, Penn State averages 1.6 takeaways a game. Notre Dame averages 2.2 takeaways per game. Aller needs to play mistake-free football. We've seen in some of the bigger games against the bigger opponents, he hasn't done that. He may have only thrown 7 interceptions, but he threw a crucial one against Oregon, had a couple turnovers against Ohio State, last year against Ohio State, obviously. So it's just when in the bigger games and against the better opponents, he's struggled a little bit. Now, the penalty side, Notre Dame had penalty issues against Georgia. I mean, that was holding them back a lot. It seemed like they were just going to call, hey, let's just rush the punter all night. I don't care if he gets injured or not. Let's just rush the punter like crazy. But Penn State's a little more disciplined with their penalties so far on the year. So if you get a mistake-free football game and you get, mostly a clean game from the refs, this has the makings of like a 17-14 type game, and it could go either way if it's all mistake-free.
Yeah, and both these teams have been solid special teams wise and stuff. I'd be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question in regards to who played mistake, because again, both of them were so good in the turnover margin. You got anything else you want to add before we throw out our game picks?
No, let's get to game picks, man. What do you think on this one?
Man, I am going to go. I've gone back and forth with this one. I just have, and I'm just going to honestly. I think that again, both of these teams, like the Spider-Man meme, as far as looking at one another and how they want to play this game at the line of scrimmage and win this game with physicality. I do think that Penn State has more of the ability to open up a little bit more on offense. But I just think that right now, Notre Dame is the way that they're playing and the way Marcus Freeman is coaching and has this team just dialed all the way in right now and playing above their heads, honestly. I think Notre Dame makes the least amount of mistakes, makes another big play in the special teams game, and they find a way to win this game, like you said, like a 17-14, 20-17, lower scoring. And I think Notre Dame finds a way to get this one. I think that they probably do force, like you mentioned, a turnover from Drew Aller, and they find a way to get this one in a close battle with Penn State.
That's a bummer. That's a bummer for the pod. Usually when Lance picks against Notre Dame, they're in good shape. But I don't usually give picks on Notre Dame games, but this one to me feels pretty similar to that Georgia game. And I think that whichever quarterback deals with pressure the best, that team will have more success. And from what I've seen, I think Riley Leonard deals with pressure. If he gets pressured, he can use his legs a lot more than Drew Aller. And I think that Notre Dame is going to try to get pressure up the middle against Drew Aller and put pressure in his face to make him get out of the pocket a little bit. Excuse me. And I think Notre Dame is going to win the game. I think they're going to head to the national championship. I think that defensive line, obviously with all the attrition they've had, but Gabriel Rubio coming in there for Riley Mills and really showing out, just kind of shows some of the depth that they've created on that defensive line. And I think that they're going to force Aller into some mistakes, like you said. I think they're going to be able to contain, not shut down, but contain Katron Allen and Nick Singleton enough to where they get it done in a closer game. So I don't think it's going to be a 13-point spread unless they, get a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown again. So, and like Chris said, that's how football is played. I mean, it's a oddly shaped ball and it bounces different ways. And sometimes you just got to catch the breaks and catch the bounces. Okay, that's it for us. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate Chris Vanini from The Athletic for joining on with us and talking some ball. As always, follow us on all the socials and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Subscribe, share with your friends. We appreciate it. We'll be back to recap these games later on in the week. And then after that, national championship. It's hard to believe we've only got 3 college football games left this year. So it went by fast. It went by super fun, though. So we'll be back soon.